Everybody, GORDYS GASBAGS hits hump day. It is Wednesday. And as I told you last night at the completion of Sue Hawkins' episode, that I had to be on my absolute best behaviour for today's interview. Now, without a doubt, since we've started GORDYS GASBAGS, there has been a huge number of requests for various people. But let me tell you, there has been an enormous request for me to get an umpire on the program, and two names have been popping up constantly. One was Chris Burton and the other was Maureen Boyle. Well, I'm scared of Chris, so I decided to go with Maureen. Hi, Moors.
Hi, Sue. That was your first mistake. She will tell you everyone's frightened of her, but I'm the one that they should be frightened of.
It's so fun. Well, firstly, as you say, like I've tried to dress appropriately.
Yeah, come to the light, girl.
I kind of think white looks all right on me.
You do look good in white. Look at that tan.
It shows my tan off.
It does.
Hey, Moz, thanks so much for agreeing to come on GORDYS GASBAGS. First and foremost, as I ask everybody, how have you been going over there in Sydney with COVID?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. But for me, it's no different. I moved the office home years ago, so everything's just keeps on progressing well. The only thing is all my weddings are sort of postponed till next year.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll just be busier next year. So
yeah.
But we're good. We're good.
Oh, that's good. I'm very pleased. You know, I don't do a lot of research for GORDYS GASBAGS. Everyone thinks I spend an enormous amount of time looking stuff up. I might spend a few minutes, but one of I think the sad factors of our sport has been a real lack of reporting on the history of our umpires, to be honest. So if I try to look up somewhere and say, how many games did Maureen umpire international? It's very, very difficult to find, Moors.
You won't find that because it wasn't until Judy Dunbar, who lived here in New South Wales, did some research many years ago, and she loves data, so she did a lot of things. But I was fortunate because the amount of teams I travelled with, and in the days of World Champs back when I was umpiring, every country had an umpire. So there were a lot of games played at World Champs, and she tallied up 168. Would you believe that?
Wow.
That's how old and how long I lasted.
So 168 international caps.
Internationals, yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
But you won't find that in any records with Netball Australia or anything. They hadn't started doing that stuff then.
It needs to happen. I mean, it's happening now, yes. As we know, we're monitoring, you know, National League games and that, but it's sad that we can't go back and try and get a little better at our history.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Lots of times.
Yeah. When I guess the most blatant question for me is, how did you journey to the white side?
Well,
did you play netball?
Yes, I did.
Were you a wing attack?
Excuse me, I started my life as a goal attack.
See,
quickly transitioned to a wing attack. But let me tell you the story of how I started. A lot of people do know this, but there's probably many of your people that don't. When I was about 8 or 9 in primary school, we had to make a choice for Friday afternoons. And at that time, there were only 2 choices for girls. It was music or it was netball, or women's basketball as it was known then.
Yep.
So I made my choice. Guess?
Netball. Music.
Music.
Oh, you didn't. You went to music.
But, however, I come from a family, my parents, my grandparents, all great sports people. My mother was a state swimmer, a golfer, a tennis player. My dad was a footballer, and athletics. And I went proudly home with a note from school telling me what I needed to get for music. And, that changed, didn't it? The wisdom of your parents, which you will understand at the end of this, that they made the right choice.
Yeah.
I was sent back the next day in tears with a note that said, our daughter will play netball.
Oh.
And so it began, and so the journey continued. Yeah.
And you were a goal shooter.
Started as a goal attack,
a
beautiful goal attack. You know, the old New South Wales spin the ball and point your toe and put the ball.
Yep.
That quickly changed.
Yeah.
Became a wing attack. Played all the way through to college. In the college team, I was sent away to Teachers College at Wagga. It's when they sent you off to places you never knew existed.
Yep.
And where I was umpires convener, coached the primary school teams, and played myself.
Wow.
Then there was no time in that, spend all my time umpiring. My umpiring career didn't start very well.
Why is that? So because I'm trying to understand, and I see now there's a terrific education program and a pathway in place for umpires, but I mean, you would have entered your umpiring career, when I say at the start, like there was umpires around, but it wouldn't be something that someone said, right, Maureen, we've identified you, come here, was it? It was, you had to dip your toe in?
Well, not in a formal way, but I've been very fortunate. You know how they say it takes a village to raise a child?
Yeah.
Well, it took a whole damn village to convince me to umpire. My sister was a rep player. She was a very good player. She played for New South Wales. She then went into touch and captained Australia in touch. But I would always be at all the rep trainings. And so I was fortunate with the women that were there at the time, Norma Ward and Jeanette Mulville, which all the Manly people would know well. They saw something in me. I didn't want to do it. So gave them grey hair while they convinced me I could do it and play. So that's why I convince players now that they can do both.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. Ella Southby and Susie Meany, they'll love this.
Yeah.
They were my biggest disappointments. They said that they wanted to be an AA umpire. And I said, yep, I'm ready when you're ready. But the reason behind that for those two was that Melbourne, when Joyce Brown was their coach when they were playing for Melbourne, they were all whinging and moaning about the umpiring on the game they were on. And Joyce said to them, hold the phone, hand up everyone who has an AA badge here. And she was the only one, of course.
Yeah.
And she said, well, until such times as you have an AA badge, you cannot speak.
Zip it. Oh, Alice Southby could have been a very good umpire. Susan Meany, I don't know if it suits Suze, but definitely Ella. I could see her as an umpire.
They could have, yeah. But, of course, they've gone into coaching, so that's great. They're still involved and it's fantastic.
So at what point for you, when you were umpiring, did you go, well, hold on a second, I might be half decent at this, or I can really, hit my straps in this world?
Never.
God, I love you. You're so good.
I was my worst critic. I know that.
Really?
I was, absolutely. But I learned to accept criticism really well from the start, because I was in a car coming home from carnivals with my sister and her cohorts, and they never held back in telling me whether the things I did wrong. But I've always taken the players' ideas on board and tried to improve that way. I've never been frightened of the criticism. But I had my own demons, but, take a deep breath and get out there and do it.
Well, you did, and you did it bloody well, Moors. Like as I said, through the era of, I guess, the athletes that I've been speaking through GORDYS GASBAGS, when you think of the two umpires that I guess were present through that era, there were a lot, don't get me wrong, but you and Chris really stand out. And because am I right in saying that back in those World Cup days, they would actually choose, as you said before, they would choose an umpire from each country. You would travel with the team.
Oh, look, that was my greatest blessing. It really was. I travelled with many teams. The AIS, when they first began, when they were a foundation sport at the AIS, travelled with them all over the place. Then progressed to the Australian team, which, you know, I had my baptism of fire with Colleen Bond at the Australia Games in 1985. We were welcomed to the big time.
Yeah.
We learned some valuable lessons there. So, oh gosh, and I've toured and worked with nearly every Australian coach.
Wow.
And I have learnt so much from every one of them. But at New South Wales, the one I learnt a lot from in those early days was Marg Corbett.
Yeah.
And I always roomed with Marg Corbett.
Oh, really?
And there's thousands of stories that go with that. At Nationals, you know, we had different time frames of when I was umpiring, when the team were playing. But the team meeting was always in our room at night. And there's so many of them, you know, Devry and Cusack, all those innocents on your GORDYS Gasbags that I've watched as recent.
Oh.
There was a team meeting, and I usually just came out of the shower in my jammies and jumped into my bed because I was invariably umpiring the first game of the day the next day. And the buggers short-sheeted my bed. I got into bed, snuggled up, didn't notice, and the joke was on them.
They didn't short sheet it short enough.
No.
That would have been led by Keely Devry. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Hey, so let me pose this question to you, because I think there's something really special about I guess that time when you did travel with the team. You weren't like, you know, if we look today, it's so separate. It's so separate. There is this great wall of China, you know, between and I do think it's an issue, and we'll get to all of that in a minute, but I kind of think that we're missing something because, you know, back then the camaraderie and the respect that used to exist through that time, and, you know, for you to sit there with a smile on your face and talk about your involvement and the stories, what's happened?
I've pondered that myself. I mean, we did get to the stage where at World Championships, every country bought their own umpire. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of development happening in some places at that time. But Margie Caldo actually came back from a World Championships at one stage and said we should have an international pool of umpires. It came to our National Umpires Committee, which I lament that we now no longer have. All the great minds coming together and thrashing it out. Yep. Don't have that anymore. And I said at the time, well, how can we ask the world to implement an international pool of umpires when we don't run a pool of umpires ourselves at our nationals? So we've all progressed a long way. England, New Zealand, Australia. Nobody asks anymore where the umpire happens to live. And I've never thought that where you live should impact your umpiring, because you would never give up your integrity for a team. Never.
So are you saying that an international pool of umpires, the best should umpire the best?
I still live for that day. I blame myself for this. Well, no, I don't necessarily blame myself for this. The last time the two that were considered the best at Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur were Janice McKercher from New Zealand and myself. Yep. Now, that was a whole time when the rules all changed the day before the competition began. Yep. And so we had to quickly get to everybody and try and disseminate what the rules were. And sadly for New Zealand, that didn't happen on that last. I know Yvonne Willerin's going to kill me when she hears this. But they hadn't been informed about the changes and not telling the umpires about substitution and everybody being able to substitute if time was called. That was a big change at that time. So that caused some unsettlement within the team. So, yeah, it was an interesting tournament. It was also a tournament where I became very, 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 very ill, and so it caused my early retirement, which I didn't really want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we're. I think the divide has happened as a result of that, but it was never intended that way.
No, that's what I was going to just point out, that wasn't the intent of the moment.
Never the intention. That I still believe that we should have the best umpires at the tournament, because invariably, if it was Australia and New Zealand and there were 7 or 8 Kiwis and Australian umpires at the tournament, it meant none of them were eligible to umpire the final. And I think that's just not a very progressive way for our sport at the moment internationally. And I'd love to see it change to do the best.
And so I guess the flip side of that argument, and I'm interested to hear your perspective, the flip side of that argument is that, if we continue to put the best, and if the best at this point in time come from Australia and New Zealand, and we continue to put the best on the best games, how does the rest of the world stay in touch?
But that is our challenge, and should always be our challenge, to get the education out to those countries and using the best people to do that. It's not happening. So it's very possible, as we've proven in Asia, there's some very talented umpires, but they're perceived as being from that country, so therefore they can't be good enough.
Yeah.
And that is just so wrong. I don't prescribe to that at all. I think anyone is capable, given the right training and education, that they can be the best.
So, Moors, while we're having, this is kind of a serious moment through Gordy's Gasbags.
It is a bit.
But we're going to continue on it for the moment, because I'm a massive advocate at the moment, and had the pandemic not have hit, and it's not to say that this conversation won't be, front and centre when we resume, but I'm a bit of a pusher, on a big advocate at the moment around our game will only increase and improve at Suncorp Super Netball level, as an example, once we start, developing our umpires at the same level of professionalism that we see our SSN clubs develop. So the amount of time and effort that goes into the development of a coach and the players, in my opinion, is nowhere near the equivalent of what's going into our umpires. And I think that's, it's wrong.
It is. It's very sad, because when the two should continue to challenge each other, to raise the bar for both. But if there's no interaction happening between the teams and the umpires, then they don't get the opportunity to discuss it, talk about it, get to know me as a person, have fun with each other, understand each other, and understand what players are trying to do and what coaches are trying to do. It is all of us working together. And we did have that. We had that brilliantly. But it's sort of gone to the great divide. I think you're quite right. And that scares me, because I just don't think that we're working that out terribly well at the moment.
It needs to happen, Moors. And
well, I'm pleased to hear you say that. Yep.
Yeah.
When you talk about Burton and I, we always challenged each other, and we were very different. Because I could never stride like she did, and she could never do my sidestep. So.
You've beaten me to it. Oh, that was going to be my big one. I was going to say, no one has ever been as graceful as sidestepping as you, Maureen.
I don't know. They told me that I used to do the cross step. I don't believe that, but anyway.
Oh, dear. I've got some fond memories, but, I do. I just remember the gracefulness of you on one side, and then you'd look to the other side and you'd see Chris Burton, and you just never spoke back to Chris. You didn't not that we spoke back to you, but we never got a word in with Chris. You just look and go, yes, no problems, okay.
Yes, it was quite unfair. She could make the goal line in 3 steps. It'd take me about 30.
Hey,
but as different as we work sorry.
Yeah, keep going. No, keep going.
As different as we were, we were a perfect balance for each other. And so we've always said to umpires, we want you to be you. It is your individuality that can be your strength. And so we've tried to, but I just get the feeling that now we're sort of wanting a bland level. So
we need
that's
characters.
my personal opinion. They're going to hate me.
No. And we're all entitled, but that's just it. That's what you're asking for, Maureen. You want character to come through. I'm going to give you an example of that, which was highlighted through last year's season, which was when Michelle Fippard, in a moment, had a conversation directly with the player on the court, used her name, and then piped back at her again. And we all laughed. It was hysterical. It could have turned left or right. It could have gone pear-shaped, you know, with a bit of animosity and maybe us as commentators, you know, whipping up a storm because that's what we do. Or alternatively, we turned it into a moment and said, look at the character of Michelle Fippard. And I scream for that with the umpires.
Yeah, you have to show who you are. And if you've got a good rapport, you can do that. But, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Hey, Moors, in your career, you only ever sent 2 players off the court?
Oh, you have done some research.
Now, one was Catherine Harvey.
That's a whole new conversation, that one.
Do you want to talk about both of them?
Well, our role as an umpire, and I do teach this, is that if you are umpiring at your very best, then the discipline clause is in the back of the rule book for a very good reason. It is a last resort.
Yep.
I lament that we seem to be throwing out cautions to the wind currently, and I think they then lose relevance. So I think that when it was short and sweet, you can't keep writing a rule book and for every situation that's ever going to happen. You're in big trouble then. So, yes, I sent 2 players off. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. One was in Melbourne. I mean, I vividly remember them both that had such an impact. Yeah. One was in Melbourne. I'm not going to mention the player. And it was just a whole series of times leading up to crunch time. And it was just 2 centre passes. But, yeah, it was hard. And the other was an international. It was a combined Americas team playing here. And, yes, it was one step too far.
Was that hard?
But to her credit, the coach, which was Jean Pierre at the time,
yeah,
she didn't put that player back on.
Right.
She was telling that player what you were doing is not acceptable, therefore you're staying off. Yeah, but it's the worst feeling, Sue. You feel sick.
Yeah, so explain that. Give me some understanding of that, because I don't get it. You know, like I think I kind of look at it, and from a coaching perspective, I'd kind of look and go, you know, like if this is my last resort, I'm umpiring well, you're annoying me, you've broken get off. That's my nature, you know. I'm trying to understand
you doing that.
Are you just such a beautiful person that it's hard, or are you saying that as an umpire, it's an exceptionally difficult? I understand.
I think our job.
Yeah.
I think our job is to keep players on the court.
Okay.
And do what we can to manage that well.
Yep.
Yeah. It's calmly and simply, not the complex stuff.
Yep. Okay. All right. I'm with you. Hey, listen, let me ask you this one. Can we get our umpires to call players by their name?
I think there could be a moment for that, if you want to draw attention to them. I've certainly had those conversations with Sarah Sutter and Catherine Harvey at times. Okay, Catherine.
Yes.
But in the main, for the simplicity of the game, and it's cleaner to call them by position, and especially probably now that you're moving into all these rolling subs, and you have a newbie umpire, it's the very thing that could throw them if that's an expectation of them. and you don't want to do that. So,
but a balance
in the main, no.
Yeah, so you're
there is a
saying
moment.
No, but you're saying that if an umpire were to turn around in the middle of the game and say, you know, I don't know, Courtney Bruce from now listen, Courtney, that's enough. You'd be okay with that?
Oh yeah, you can. Yes, definitely. Sharon Kelly did that on one time. But yeah, it's a moment. It's not every time.
Yep, I'd love to see it, because I think, and we've had this discussion with players, that players would respond. Players would hear their name and go, "Oh, hold on a second."
It'd be terrible if you said the wrong name, wouldn't it?
The AFL umpires do that occasionally, so don't stress. So were you, how many years? 30 odd years umpiring?
That's quite cruel, Sue.
No, I thought you were going to tell me it was more, and I've undermined you.
It is more. It is more, but we won't go there.
Oh, God love you. And
got to remember, I was a baby when I started.
Yeah.
And I created a problem right from the start, because I had people who wanted me to be tested for my C badge when I was 12.
Oh.
But New South Wales had a ruling that you had to be 16 before you could be badged. So I had all these people fighting for me, and I had no idea they were. So that changed the whole system in New South Wales. So I was the youngest sort of in everything by then. Yeah.
You're a bit of a groundbreaker, Moors, for someone that wanted to do music.
Some would call it a thorn in the side.
Yeah.
Ask Pam Smith. She didn't call me the bantam hen for nothing. Administrators really, I don't, just because they say it doesn't necessarily mean that I believe it. So I will always fight for the players and what I think is right for the game. Yeah. But it irritates them no end. I know I'm an irritation.
Now, in terms of your experience of umpiring and those that you've, you know players, as you say, who did you just think was a delightful player to umpire? Does that stand out for you?
Oh, God, there's so many.
Oh, really?
Look, I tell umpires today, when you're really doing your best and the players are doing their best and they're allowed to play within the framework that's there for them, you can be first-hand witness to the magic. Yeah. And two who had magic for me were Kiwis, and that was Margie Matenga and Margie Forsyth. They were just magical.
Yep.
But, the Australian team is littered with talent, and they were just... Well, I had a really good rapport with all of them.
Yeah.
I think.
You do. Yeah.
When we travelled together, like the times when we go to the Caribbean and we always have a stopover in LA, and we do the, Disneyland trick, and they'd all stick me under the height measurer to see if I was able to go on the ride.
Oh, God, they're bitches, aren't they?
It didn't matter. I loved it. Yeah, and they thought it was a great joke, but that's okay. That's okay. So we really enjoyed that. So, yeah, look, just so many.
What
wonderful players.
What about the flip side of that question then? Were there players that stood out that pushed boundaries all the time?
Oh, yeah. They wouldn't be doing their job if they didn't try to push the boundary.
But some push boundaries more than others.
Yeah, they do, and I'm not going to tell you who they are.
Yes, you are, Maureen. You can't come on this show and hold it all back. No, who pushed back? I mean, Kath Harbs did. We know Kath Harbs did.
She did.
Yeah. Who else?
Look, there's lots of players who have tried that. I'll tell you. Do you want a story? Have we got
go for it. I'd love a story.
The baptism of fire game at the Australia Games was between Trinidad and England. And Helen Cadman, who was the shooter for England at that time, was playing a blinder and shooting goals for everywhere. Well, standing her was Jennifer Franks from Trinidad, right? Yep. So, obviously, frustrated or decided that Helen had to go, they kept delaying a taking of a penalty. Poor Colleen Bond's end. Oh, thank God it wasn't my end. It was Colleen's, poor thing. We've never, we learned a lot that day.
Yeah.
But Jennifer jumped, kneed Helen Cadman in the groin, and that was the end of her. But the next year, we were in Trinidad, and I was sitting by the pool, and Jennifer plonked herself down next to me, and we had a great old chat. And we talked about that game, and I said, "You're a bad bugger," and she said, "It's like this, Maureen. If the umpire is not looking at me, then she is mine." And I said, "Oh, good. Thanks for the heads up, Jennifer." Yeah. So I thought, rightio, I've really got to concentrate on my peripheral vision. It needs to be a lot wider. So every time I umpired her, we would eyeball each other, and she'd get this great big white smile on her face.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
And we'd both laugh. But she taught me a valuable lesson. Yeah. Never take your eyes off all the players in your half. So, you learn something. Yeah. You learn something every time. Yeah.
Was it challenging umpiring some of those Caribbean nations?
Well, because it was different, and they had such, their aerial skills were just amazing. So you learn so much from that, when to look and what you're looking for, because, it's a long way up in the air for me to take the whole player.
Do you know what? I have not dropped one small... I did. I called you wing attack. But beyond that, you're the one doing all the small jokes.
Because it's what's happened, and it's a reality.
Oh, funny.
I can laugh at that. It's a big girls' game,
Yeah.
So, like when we did toss-ups, and they still exist, by the way, everybody. And they can be an excellent call if you've got something catching at the same time. So a lot of umpires are not practicing toss-ups at the moment. They will come unstuck if they have to make that decision. So, yeah.
What do you look at Suncorp Super Netball now, our modern day brand, and what arguably is the world's best netball competition and one of the world's best women's products, sporting products? Do you admire what you see?
Well, I do, of course, because they're training so hard and training every day, and they are so much fitter and stronger, physically stronger. But I still say there's the line in the sand. And as I've taught over the years, if you want to push that line in the sand, the further you push it, then you're never going to have the umpiring you want. So the discipline that comes with the skills that they have, which are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The responsibility comes that if you're a part of that skill, if you're beaten to the ball or you're beaten on a move, then the important skill is knowing how to pull out. And just letting the players decide is not the answer. What it is or it isn't. So you set the parameters at the beginning, and they know you and they know what you'll accept, and then we go for it. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember.
I have had a number of conversations with various umpires over the last couple of years. And again, I guess this conversation or this suggestion is supported by, sadly, the lack of funding and emphasis, I think, that goes towards the umpiring fraternity. But I would dearly love to see that communication increased, as you said before, between umpires, players and coaches. But I would love on a weekly basis at Suncorp Super Netball a theme that was put out there where the umpires have been able to discuss from the previous week, see where something may be negatively trending or where something is positively trending, and actually relay that back as a general statement to all teams, meaning to say, keep this going because this is the direction we want the game to go, or heads up teams, If this continues, you'll hear the whistle this weekend. What do you think of that?
We've been there, done that.
Oh, no, we have. Why aren't we doing it again? I know. I've had this conversation.
I don't know.
No.
I don't know. I'm the wrong person to ask. God.
We need it, Moors.
Look, it's really important. I don't see why coaches need to understand that most of our umpires are working people as well. Not so much at the moment, but they're working people as well. So if they structured trainings where the umpire came in and they worked together on those things at a time when the umpires could actually go, like 10 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, it's not going to work. So I think we need a little bit of collaboration in that direction, and I think it could work. Those messages could be there. Gee, there was a time when the coaches got to rate the umpires. That wasn't a pretty sight.
What time was
It depended who won and lost.
What time was that? When would that?
No, don't ask me. That's ages ago. I'm working in the last century.
Bloody hell!
We've tried it. We've been there, tried it all.
Wow. Yeah.
Some of them worked really well.
Yeah.
But you've got to have confidence in each other, and and feel that you're still safe. And I don't know.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think the higher powers understand the importance. Just got to try and make sure we either prioritise dollar accordingly, or we find an increase in funding, because
because if your umpiring standard doesn't match your playing standard, you've got a big problem.
Yeah, correct.
And it will be dog eat dog, and who's the last man standing, and we don't want that,
because then we lose the absolute beauty of the game. Maureen, if you look at Suncorp Super Netball now, and you could take, say, one rule or a theme or something and say, keep it going, like that is where netball should be, what would it be?
A playing rule?
Yeah, playing rule, or like a concept around, from your perspective.
It's a good question.
Thanks.
It's okay. I don't know the answer. It's everything I've said, and I just think we need still some strong people leading those umpires along the way. Yep. I think it's a big educational stream. It's not working as well as it used to. In fact, they've dumped some of them. The one that I really loved doing was the rules in action.
Yep.
Which was coaches, players and umpires coming together and discussing it. So we all had a great idea and could thrash out the questions and say, well, I don't agree with that. But that's gone too, and I think that's sad.
Yeah, okay. So then I'll ask you then maybe the flip side, if you look at Suncorp Super Netball, or if you could change a rule, is there a rule?
Don't go. No,
I'm going there. I'm really curious. Like, if you could change a rule that you felt either would enhance the game, or what would you change?
There's a whole lot I would change.
Oh, I've got half an hour. Let's go. No, I'm actually interested. You're not being held to this.
Netball is a simple game of threes. Wise words from Eunice Gill to me a long time ago. A simple game of threes that we managed to stuff up. And I think we've lost the simplicity, and we've tried to make it something that it doesn't need to be. I just think the basics, absolutely, maintain the basics, work on our skills and techniques. I don't think that happens a lot, the techniques of umpiring, just like the techniques that the players work on. They go hand in hand. So, but rules, I'm not really up with what's happening in Suncorp rules.
This year,
I don't mind. We had to take away the injury time. I heard Norma talking about that the other night, because people just obviously not injured. So it would be do away with the injury time, because you've got what is virtually now rolling subs.
Do you like, will rolling subs will come in as a rule this year for Suncorp Super Netball?
Yes.
You think that's good?
Right.
You like that?
Yeah, well applied, yes.
Okay.
I have no problem with it.
Mm.
The ridiculousness that we made the injury rule brought that undone. So, a number of us were working on that for many years, because we used to have a rules committee here in Australia that had a coach, a player, umpires, and the top umpire at the time. And that was really good, because we had great discussions sending things through to INF.
Very interesting.
I think we've done away with our expert committees, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah, I think it is too. And only in chatting with Susie Hawkins last night, the CAPS committee that exists internationally with the likes of, Norma Plummer, Yvonne Willering, Sue Hawkins, McIntosh. I mean, these are the minds of our game.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's right. And we need it here in Australia too, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went into the Netball Australia Hall of Fame in 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, what an honour.
Does that mean you're old?
No, gosh, you keep tagging yourself with this stuff. I'll tell you what, you look tremendous. You look brilliant.
Listen, I had a young player last year down at our local district, and she was really angry. A shooter who was really angry. And she was yelling at the umpire big time, and I was sitting on her goal line, and the game finished, and I walked past her and I said to her, please don't play angry, enjoy what you're doing. Well, that didn't go down well. She wrote a letter about me, about this random elderly woman who spoke to her.
Oh, that's terrible.
I've been called all sorts of things, but yeah, that's okay.
Actually, just as you were speaking then, you did say something. It's a bit of my pet hate. I hated the fact that we changed from baseline to goal line.
We never changed.
Oh, it was? Oh, shit, here we go. Wasn't it always baseline? Or it's always been the goal line?
It's always been the goal line. It's just, I won't say about commentators, but yes, it's become...
No. Oh, well, I mean, but
I keep shouting at you.
As a player and as a coach, we talk about things like backline throw-ins, BLTIs,
yes.
Right? Backline throw-ins, sideline throw-ins. It's just never been part of the vocabulary, I guess, to say a goal line throw-in. Or, I don't know. So has it always been in the rule book as goal line? I felt like there was a significant point in time where all of a sudden everyone kept saying, no, it's now known as goal line. Sorry.
That's okay. I can live with it.
Do you?
It's just not part of me.
Do you cringe at times listening to us as commentators?
Yep.
But
I'll say this about Liz Ellis, because I will say something nice about her in a minute. But every time she said, the umpire should just let that go, I go, no. Line in the sand, Liz.
Oh, dear.
It is or it isn't.
I know. I mean, you do know that...
And I will say something nice about her in a minute.
Oh, I was just going to say, you do know that there is a little bit of a wooden spoon and a stirring of the pot.
Absolutely. And it works.
Yeah. There was a game last year in Canberra that I commentated with Kath Cox, and it was Firebirds and Giants, and I called it a bloodbath, and I hated commentating it, and I hated commentating it because I felt everyone was just abusing our sport. I felt like the coaches were abusing it. I felt like the players were abusing it. And I felt like the umpires were abusing it because I felt like they needed to step up. But then when we spoke to the umpires, they're saying the players and the coaches needed to step up. And it was a really interesting point in time for me. I think I just blatantly said it. I've had enough of calling this game. It was terrible.
Yeah. And that is terrible when that happens. But it is a matter of what we've already said a million times already. It's about everyone taking responsibility. skills and techniques of, the responsibility for getting it right.
I'll let you have a moment to say something nice about Liz Ellis. This would be a rare moment for me to do this because she doesn't need really the spotlight.
No. Well, this is true.
But you can. Feel free.
She'll probably deny she ever said this, but it is one of the nicest things said about me as an umpire. Now, whether it was tongue-in-cheek,
no,
I took it as a compliment. Okay.
Right.
Umpires only need a breadcrumb of a compliment to keep them going for a little while. And it was actually when I retired, and there was an article in a magazine done, and Liz was quoted as saying that about me, we the players consider umpires just frustrated players. But we think of Maureen as a player who just never grew tall enough.
Oh, my goodness.
So I thought that was a lovely thing to say. But, everyone I've ever worked with has taught me something.
Oh dear! That is Liz Ellis to a T.
Yeah. There are so many of them that I could tell stories about, but I'm sure they're probably waiting for the moment. But I'm leaving them alone. They're safe.
Oh, that
Shelley O'Donnell machine. But I loved my time at New South Wales with Mark Corbett. Yeah. She taught me. She was such a great. She was so big on strategy. She was wonderful, but she was a woman ahead of her time. She brought in Johnny Lewis with boxing for the girls. She brought in the AFL players way back then to teach them elevation, and we did dancing, and I was included in all these things, so. But she also taught me a very valuable lesson not to take myself too seriously.
Yeah.
And to see the fun side of it. And that was great for me because I did always. And I learned too that if a player threw a dirty look at me, not to get all hot under the collar about it, to think about it later and think, okay, what could I have done better and what did I miss?
Yeah.
And so, they're sort of, things I learned from her. She was great.
Yeah, Meg Corbett, great lady. And I do some coaching business on the side, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I turned up in New South Wales and one of the first person registered.
She loves you.
Oh, I didn't mean it for that. I didn't even know that.
No, seriously, she does.
I was honoured that she was even turning up to something that, she could have delivered with her eyes closed and her hands behind her back.
She always considers that she's got more to learn.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
After being there and doing all of that. The other coach that I learnt so much from, who scared me, scared me big time, was Joyce Brown.
I knew you were going there.
But I just learnt so much from her. She demanded excellence from the moment you walked into the training court till the very end. And she was relentless with that. But the most caring, got to know you as a person. I think I grew as not only an umpire, I grew as a person working with her. It was such a privilege.
Yeah, I've never heard in any sentence about Joyce Brown through this whole GORDYS GASBAGS. It may be that there's a quirky story or a tough moment, but it's always then linked to an incredible lady.
Oh, yeah. She got to know her players individually. It took a lot of time, as you would know, doing that.
Yeah.
So she knew what would bring out the best in each of them, which was so different. If they needed to be shouted at, she did that. If they didn't quite respond to that, she worked her way through that. Yeah. No, I learned so much from her as an umpire.
Moors, it's been so lovely chatting. I have thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. And I know that you have watched a few of GORDYS GASBAGS, so I'm also then aware that you realise you might have to belt a tune out.
Yeah, we are. We are.
We? What do you mean we?
We. My Danny's going to help me.
Danny! Where is Danny? Pop your head in, Danny.
No, he's not popping his head in.
Oh.
He said, I don't want my face on there. But we thought about this because you know how terrified I am.
Oh, dear.
I related well to Willering the other night when she said she scared the two dogs and they ran out of the bedroom. But we know that before Christmas last year, you visited Dublin and a few pubs in the Temple Bar area of Dublin.
I may have, that's correct.
So we thought it would be really good to sing an Irish drinking song for you.
Wait on. Even though it's Corona, I just want it front and centre.
Oh, yeah. You're going to need that. For two reasons, that one and that listening to me sing will drive you to drink.
Well,
there are parts where you have to clap, so you're going to have to
okay, hold on. This is a bit difficult. Wait on. There we go. Here's the good news before you start. Being the first umpire on, you don't get compared to anybody.
There's no benchmark.
There's no benchmark. You get to set it.
No, I'm not going to look at you because you're going to make me laugh.
Okay, don't look at me. I'll laugh. I'll introduce you. Here we go, folks. One of the nicest umpires that's ever graced our courts. Beautiful smile. Singing karaoke for you all, Maureen Boyle.
Okay, here we go.
As I was going over the Cork and Kerry mountains, I met with Captain Farrell and his money he was counting. I first produced my pistol, I then produced my rapier, said stand and deliver, for you are my bold deceiver. Mushering dum-a-doo dum-a-da. Whack for the daddy-o. Whack for the daddy-o. There's whiskey in the jar.
I love that one. Hey, has Danny got an Irish accent?
He is Irish.
He is Irish.
Yeah, that's why we're singing an Irish song.
Oh, I didn't actually know if he was Irish when I was there. That was one of the best Irish impersonations of a non-Irish person that's actually Irish.
No, he tells the story that he came here for a 1-year working holiday as a teacher forever ago.
Yeah.
And no convict has ever served the sentence he served. He's still here.
Can you pop your head in? We want to say hello. We need a face to the voice.
Oh, the beautiful man. He's a beautiful man to put up with me.
Hello, Gordy. How are you?
Come in. Come around. Bring him around.
I can't see you. Bend.
Wait a minute now. I've got a bad knee.
That's the Gaelic football knee.
Hey, Danny, how are you?
Very well.
I'm
Slancher.
I'm so glad you got your Guinness out.
This is Slancher Gordy.
Any excuse.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, you've got a beautiful other half. Look at the two of you. I'm so delighted that you've had a chance to have a chat with me, Moors. It's been terrific. To be honest with you, that is the best karaoke we've had the entire 5 weeks.
I told Maureen she would raise the bar.
Oh, I bloody love an Irishman.
Yeah. And, I would never have been able to do all those tours I did. I mean, the first tour I did with the AIS, our baby son, Michael, was only 9 months old. Yeah. So I would never have been able to do it without Danny. And my mother, my late mother.
Yeah, no, and you're right, because in a world of sport, women's sport, for such a long period of time where there was no return except for the love of the sport, our families, our nearest and dearest, deserve gold medals, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. Mind you, the sons tell a different story, but...
That's for another show. Oh, guys, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Sue.
Yeah, look after yourselves during COVID. I'm hoping that our government announces a bit of a change up for us and that things start to smooth out and we can get netball back. Hey, and Danny, when I'm over next, we'll hit the Irish pubs.
We certainly will.
You're in trouble.
Looking forward to it.
There you go, guys. That's another episode of GORDYS GASBAGS. A big thanks to Maureen Boyle.